It's never been easy, and it's never been a task that's completely accomplished. We're going to take a look at the city today and see how religious values can possibly assist in the process.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, and welcome once again to Austin Faith Dialogue. Today we have the pleasure and the honor of visiting with Mayor Bruce Todd, Mayor of the City of Austin. And Bruce, we're very happy to have you here and look forward to an opportunity to discuss some very common interests. As I said in the opening, the city is a reality that's been around for a long time. Christianity has, in a sense, a certain affinity for the city. If you look at the New Testament, the books that are written by St. Paul, St. Peter, St. John, St. James, are all to cities. The church is for people everywhere, and we reach out into agrarian societies too, but it's when people come together and try to do things together that it seems that the human condition improves, not without some byproducts that are painful at the same time. I'm happy to have you here as a mayor of what I consider one of the really great cities of North America, Austin, Texas. And I'd like to ask you, if as you sit back and you're moving into a new period in your life as the leader of this city, what would be your hopes and your aspirations for Austin, if you could dream for a few minutes? I know you have to deal with power problems and garbage removal and costs and salaries and personnel and a lot of nuts and bolts logistical things, but if you wanted to just step back and think about human life shared together in a cultural center, such as a great city, what would you dream and what would you want?
You know, I think that much of being a mayor is being embroiled in those kinds of things, calls about potholes and trash pickups and electricity and where the airport is, all those kinds of issues. But when you're able to step back and reflect on what is, if you had to condense it to one word, what word would you use to describe an attribute that you'd like to see in the city that had the greatest promise for the future? And I think that one word, in my opinion, would be hope. Because it is my feeling that the lack of hope is the root of many of our problems, and that the ability to instill in people that there is a society in which they can live in this major city, and we are a major city, that can give them hope and opportunity for the future is one of the best things that we can do. Now, it has to be backed up with reality, meaning that there has to be a mechanism to improve on people's lives. Most people spend their entire lives trying to improve on it, trying to make things better. It doesn't mean, even when you retire, you want to look for a better fishing spot or something. And I think that trying, particularly among our young people, and we've had a lot of conversations about this over the last 3 years, but making sure our young people thought and believed and in fact had better opportunities in front of them and could hope for that better future. I think that in and of itself would be a way to summarize sort of the vision we need to look at for Austin.
Well, that's really, I really like that, because I put a great deal of stress in my own personal life and in the life of my church on the concept of hope. Hope can be seen from many different directions. In one sense, it's what we call in my world a theological virtue, but it's also very natural to the point you just made, that people are looking for a better life. They're always, it means that hope is natural in the human condition. When a baby begins to look at the world around him or around her and see things, there's optimism. What is that for? What is that for? The question I'd ask, I want this to be a positive conversation, but for just a moment or two, why is the absence of hope so present among some components of our society? And I think I know what those answers are, but I'd like you to just throw out 2 or 3 major obstacles to hopefulness present in American society and in Austin.
Well, you talked about a young child, a baby, looking outside and seeing things and anticipating the future. And I think that as one builds on their experiences, and I'm going back again to the issue of children and their hope or lack of hope, they tend to look at their immediate surroundings. And when they see in their immediate surroundings drug abuse, poverty, crime, all those kinds of issues that they may not understand in detail, but they intuitively get a feeling of negativism about what is around them. It does more to destroy hope than anything else. Child psychologists have been telling us for years that much of a person's self-worth, how they feel about themselves, is determined very, very early. And we talk about trying to break the generational gap at a later age for people moving into adulthood. But the truth is that many of those people who are moving into adulthood already have children of their own. Yeah. And there may not be that hope instilled in the immediate surroundings that is necessary to encourage that child and let them know in those very early developmental years that there are opportunities for them. When you see a repeated pattern of despair, of poverty, of all those things I mentioned previously, and then you go to an institutional setting like a church or a school and you're told there is a better life, these people have to wonder where. It's not anywhere I can see, except for taught on a theoretical basis. And I think taking an earlier look at children's lives and how we relate to them and the kind of opportunities we provide is fundamentally important as we develop this city.
That moves us, Mayor, to the issue of policy. When men and women live together, whether it be in a voluntary organization or a city, they have to agree on certain policies on how they're going to work together, how they're going to produce together. And so we have, in the area of your world, public policy, the policy of the city of Austin, the policy of the state of Texas. I want to, although we're talking about the city, we also live in Texas, and when you talk about children and young people having hope, and children living in an environment that is not only negative but destructive, you have to ask, is there a public policy to deal with that? Now, Texas has been trying for years and years to develop a more just, a more realistic mechanism for helping poor children in schools, but we have still not come to grips with that. I know that that statewide problem overflows into the life of Austin. And you as a mayor and the city council or the larger community, say the county, have to struggle with the problems of your school system. We have to do that, though, in my opinion, in the context of values. What do we value? Theoretically, I hope it's more than theoretical, but theoretically we value every human being as being equal. Every human being who's here having certain rights. And one of the rights that we have in our formative period is a right to a good education. That's being denied large numbers of children in the society in which we live. The church attempts to speak to that occasionally. Let me ask you as an elected official, and I'd like to talk later about separation of church and state. Are you comfortable with the church leaders not offering blueprints about how to run society and not having control or final say, but speaking to the issues, the problems, and the pain in society and calling us to a more equitable working relationship with each other?
Well, certainly, I believe that the role of the church and the role of church leaders, be they ministers or lay people within the church, have a tremendous opportunity and, in fact, a responsibility to do just that, to interrelate with the policymakers and to with their congregations and with the public at large through media like this and others to help explain that area of hope, of responsibility. There's one thing that we really must key on, though. We tend to look at government as being the panacea for our problems, and it is not. It has never been, nor will be in the future, nor should it be. And we have to understand that while policymakers can pass laws, and the teenage curfew law is being debated right now both on a national scene, a state scene, and certainly a local scene, and while we can deal with many of those issues through resources, public resources provided by taxpayers, parents have to take responsibility. We simply can't take these issues and say, government, the education system, you solve those issues. We can come into a public school system. The administrators at the school can offer good programs, the teachers can teach them, the city can supplement those through having police officers come in and talk about drug abuse, all those kinds of issues. And if a child goes home and sees a atmosphere where drugs are used, where what they're taught in school is in contrast to what's happening at home, it is unrealistic to believe that that child is going to have a great deal of connectivity to what he learned in school. He or she learned in school. They're going to see the home life as a more tangible suggestion about what life is really like, and that's not good in many ways, in many cases. So I think we have to work in these kinds of partnerships between the public side, the school system, the city, and the private side, which I would include being the church as an institution that deals directly with our private lives, with individuals, and most notably with families.
Well, I wish we could argue a little bit this morning. It'd be more interesting, because I couldn't agree more. I come out of a religious tradition in terms of its social theology, talks about the principle of subsidiarity. To me, it's just harsh sense. The best place to take care of a problem is as close as you can get to the problem. If you can take care of yourself, you take care of yourself. If you can't take care of yourself, you have problems, your family helps you. If your family's not able to, the extended family does. If the extended family can't, the neighborhood does. If the neighborhood can't, the church does. So there's layer on layer of responsibility. What we have in our society is that there has been such a breakdown in terms of responsibility of individuals for themselves, of parents for their children, that we have kept looking higher to a court of last resort, and in many instances, we've attempted to make it either the city or the state or even the federal government. There is a place for those entities as far as I'm concerned, but we've got to come back to in our society, and I believe that this is a very special role of the church, to develop in individuals from day one a sense of responsibility. I'm responsible for John McCarthy in some limited sense, not as much as you are, but I'm responsible for the city of Austin and the state of Texas. And when everybody in this county and everybody in the city and everybody in the state begins to think that way, that not only are they responsible for themselves, but they have responsibilities for these other organizations that they belong to, we'll have the beginnings, in my opinion, of a much more cohesive social life together, a much safer and quite frankly, economically much more productive and enjoyable. But that's I'm afraid we're a long way from there.
Well, the comment was made to me several months ago that the programs we offer today in the city of Austin were not offered when I was growing up. And I came from a single-parent household with 6 kids raised in poverty. And that's right in a sense, but what was also true is that that level of program was provided not by the government necessarily, but by the church, by neighbors, by individuals who simply took that responsibility. There was a sense of responsibility for the community, and it was a small community of about 7,000 people, but there was a sense of responsibility of one person to another, fortunate to unfortunate, wealth to poverty, where you pulled together and made these kinds of things work. In a larger city like Austin, those things are sometimes missing. I would say that if we want to be successful as Austin grows larger, we have to think smaller. And by thinking smaller, we think about our individual responsibility to our next door neighbors, to people within our congregation. And I'm not talking about you as a bishop or a priest or a preacher, but individuals in a group setting, be it a social club, be it a church, be it a civic organization, reaching out and helping the other person. There's so much difference that can be made in the lives of individuals through that kind of responsibility.
I'm an optimistic person who thinks that that's doable. I think that the city and groups like churches will have to work together on it. It's not going to be that easy, but it must be done. Stay with us with Austin Faith Dialogue as we visit with the Mayor of Austin, Bruce Todd.
Serving Austin means serving you. Each day, Austin Metropolitan Ministries is religion in action, providing affordable housing, caring for the elderly, marching against hunger, and much more. AMM promotes understanding, cooperation, and social involvement. So when we ask for your help, we're really asking to help you, Austin. To find out how you can help Austin Metropolitan Ministries help Austin through its member organizations, just call 472-7627.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where we're visiting with Mayor Bruce Todd. And we've been talking about common interests between an elected official leading a major civic entity such as a large city and smaller components of that society, and how we have to work together and interact if we're going to have the kind of society that we all want, one that's built on justice and freedom and enables all the individuals within that grouping to develop to their fullest potential. Mayor, let's come back to, you were talking about neighborhood responsibility for just a moment. That's almost lost in most major cities. It has not been lost in small towns and smaller cities. There are efforts present in Austin to develop neighborhood strength, not just in terms of neighborliness, but even to give neighborhoods a certain amount of voice in the issues that control their lives. How do you see that developing in Austin at the present time?
Well, I'm a strong proponent of neighborhood destiny, people helping to shape their neighborhood and determine what it looks like. We are, in fact, a collection of neighborhoods, perhaps dysfunctional in some ways compared to the past, but we are still a collection of people living in a geographic area that are closely bound, in many cases, with by level of income, by size of family sometimes, and certainly by location, by very definition. I was in a neighborhood a few weeks ago, and they were complaining about crime in their neighborhood. And they said, I bet you don't have the crime in your neighborhood. And I said, that's perhaps true, but do you have any sort of neighborhood organization or a neighborhood watch program? Because those are essentially organizations that are assisted by government but brought together by the neighborhood, and they had neither. And I said, we can do a lot as a city to help you, but you really must help yourself. Not only do you live here, you see what's going around. You know the people. You know what's happening in the particular area you live. And it all gets down to responsibility at some point in time. Caring about your neighbors, caring about yourself in a way to make certain that, you live in a safe area. Now, the truth is that the city has neglected certain areas of town institutionally over years. We can call it racism, we can call it any number of issues, but it's an ugly sight and something we must correct. But the city will never be able to restore those kinds of services to any area unless there's an effort to help themselves. And it can make an amazing amount of difference, not only in the overall sense of well-being within that neighborhood, but individuals, and it starts on a one-on-one basis, retrieving and having that hope we talked about earlier, that through participation they can provide for a better place to live.
Well, that's one area. That's one area where the church has certainly been at least in communication with the city, because we have two organizations here in Austin that I think are really, both of them really excellent. One is Austin Interfaith, which goes into neighborhoods, especially lower income neighborhoods, but not restricted to that, and tries to teach people a sense of responsibility that if they study the issues, if they work together, if they give time to the problems, they can exert some very real influence on the general outcome and improve their neighborhoods, improve the quality of family life. Another one is a broader membership, is Austin Metropolitan Ministries, which brings resources from the entire city to bear on particular issues such as housing, drug abuse, and things like that. I think both of them are really important I would just like to see them both stronger and both expanded. I'm going to switch for and let's talk for just a moment about the issue of church and state. I'm always amused when the church takes a stand, you know, on a particular issue, this is good or this is bad, congratulating someone here or speak, that someone will even say, you know, we have separation of church and state in this country. There's a terrible misunderstanding about the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion or the free exercise thereof. That means that we will never have an official church, that the civil society can never endorse a religious position or oppose a religious position. And that's a tremendous step forward in human society, because established churches have been, it's a bad part of religious history, and I'm glad that that's behind us. But it never was intended by our founding fathers or by the courts today that religion not have a voice, as you said, has a duty to speak out on, to call people to a better life, Are you comfortable with that?
You know,
That's a rhetorical question.
well,
I'm sorry.
no, and I think that it is well to point out that this separation of church and state does not mean what many people think it does. And it does not in any way prohibit the dialogue and, in fact, cooperative working relationship, formally and informally, between members of the religious community as a group, and government. The truth is there's so much more we can do by improving on those ties and working on each other's strengths to help our society and really fulfill our mission statement, if you will. Yours coming from a higher source, of course, but the mission that's right, and directly. But the mission statement of improving on the lives of people and helping them in this self-improvement process. I want to go back, though, because I think there's always a responsibility to the viewers of this program to understand how they can participate. Because Austin Interfaith and Metro Ministries, of course, those organizations are so vitally critical to this area that we talked about earlier of responsibility. Interfaith has come to us over the last couple of years and offered members of their congregations, plural, the children, offered them up to the city for possibility of summer employment. And some of these are in areas of high poverty where employment is a critical factor. But they have said to us, we don't want you just to employ these people, these children. We want to have mentor programs and peer programs whereby we as a church and as individuals in a church work one-on-one with these children so they can take the employment experience and help translate that into what might be later available in life. And I would encourage everybody to contact their priest or their preacher and ask how they might be involved in either one of those organizations, because they do some tremendously good work in our community that speaks very directly to our topic of responsibility and improving on the hope that people have in their lives.
I would switch to that just a little bit and encourage those priests and those preachers and those rabbis to motivate their people to contact those organizations. What I'm saying is we're all responsible. I mentioned that the church, and that's with a small c, the religious forces in our society, has a duty to speak about issues in society, and frequently it does that, and I regret this, after the fact, when great problems have developed, and frequently the voice of the church in speaking to public policy issues is a critical voice rather than a more positive voice. I wish we could improve on that. Since I'm a priest, I can afford to be critical a little of the church. I think we also do we have done society a disservice by not having a sense of responsibility of talking to our people, not only about eternal life, not only about our specific faith, whether we're Christians as followers of Jesus or coming out of the Jewish tradition and the Jewish value system, or Muslim or any other faith group, but we have to challenge people to be virtuous. And you know, virtues. When you say virtue, people sort of, you know, think sweetness and light. All of virtue is a good habit. All of vice is a bad habit. A virtue means, if you have a virtue, that you do something that's good so consistently that it's effortless. We have to call people to natural virtues in our society, and it's the role of the church to do this with its own membership. Honesty, truthfulness, integrity, a sense of responsibility. If you're at First Baptist or St. Mary's Cathedral or the local synagogue, those values are in those religious traditions. But I don't think that we've challenged our own membership enough to see that we have responsibilities at the church, not only to form ourselves spiritually in our religious tradition, but to form ourselves as human beings with a set of values that's going to overflow and impact the society in which we're living. If any of the clergy are watching me and get mad about that, I'm sorry, but we haven't done a good job of that. Specific case, marriage. Marriage is a perfect example for most people. It has civil implications. You're setting up a new social entity. It has religious implications. I don't think the churches have done a good job in preparing young couples to. My church tries hard at it, but I won't say we're successful. But that's an area where we've got to work harder to get people who are getting ready to enter into marriage to have a real commitment and a real understanding of the serious, not just love and sweetness and light, and she's beautiful and he's handsome and they both dance divinely. It's something that's going to impact the society in which we live, has great obligations attached to it. Excuse the speech.
Well, I think there is a great deal more in a relationship between someone in their church life and their private life. I remember as a very young child listening to a sermon in a Baptist church in North Texas. And the preacher made a good point. He said, you know, you can't be really a member of this church and be a practicing member and listen to me on Sunday, then go back to your business world, whether it's selling cars or insurance or sacking groceries or whatever it may be, and believe that the same principles we're talking about today at 11:15 on Sunday are not applicable at 3:30 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And I think that the ability to take that level of responsibility, of appropriate human behavior, whatever you might call it, and translate between the religious teachings, of course, and the day-to-day life, that is so fundamentally necessary. And oftentimes we don't do that, whether it's marriage or whether it's business practices. You can't, it's hard to teach love for one's, for mankind in church and then be cutthroat on Monday morning in the business world, although business is different than church, of course. And I think that that transition one world to the other is very difficult but very necessary.
Absolutely, because, you know, we talk, you talk about city ordinances, we talk about the Ten Commandments. There's a tremendous interaction. Sure. When you have premarital sex, which is against the moral law of our religious traditions, you have tremendous economic costs in the city and in the county. When you talk about crime, which is against the Seventh Commandment, you have tremendous civic cost in the civil society. So there's we share this idea that life can be lived in simple compartments separated from each other. The public life of society and the religious and moral life of its population is simply not true. And so I would look forward to an opportunity with myself and other religious leaders and yourself and other civic leaders for more cooperation in the next 10 years maybe than we've had in the last 10 years all across this country. I think there's a growing awareness of the fact that the monumental social problems that we're facing are not going to be solved without a return to values and without a return to virtue. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Mayor. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks for having me.
We want to thank all of you for joining us once again on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll see you next week.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.